Hey everybody, it's David Spark here. I am your host of the CISO Series video chat. The producer in the background, that's Andrew. And let me get you guys all up to speed on what's about to happen today. For those of you who have never participated in one of our CISO Series video chats, you're in for a treat. Today's topic is hacking insider risk, an hour of critical thinking on the unnecessary corporate risk introduced by non-malicious employee behavior. That's key. We're going to focus on that aspect of insider risk. Our guests today, which you see now in these small little windows at the bottom of the screen, are JD Hansen, who's the CISO over at Code 42, and Andy Steingrubel, who is the CISO over at Pinterest. Huge thanks to Code 42 for sponsoring this very video chat. Now, for those of you who've never participated before, let me explain what you can do. You can participate in the chat room, which we've already seen. It's a lot of fun. Submit bad ideas. So the topic is insider risk. We want to hear what are your worst ideas on how to handle insider risk. Join us on video at any time you would like with just saying, bring me on. You can do that, and Andrew will try to bring as many of you on as possible. You can ask a question. You see it says ask a question at the bottom of the screen. Ask whatever question you'd like on insider risk. Make sure it's on insider risk because I don't ask the irrelevant questions. And then lastly, you can also vote for your favorite question because often many questions come in and I can't get to all of them, or we can't get to all of them. So if you vote them up, I'll know which ones to look at first. All right, today's schedule, the questions, as you know. I also want you to submit your bad ideas.
Send them in. We need your bad ideas.
And then at 20 minutes past the hour, a poll will go live of all the bad ideas that have been submitted up to that point. So try to get your bad ideas in the first 20 minutes. And then you get to start voting on your favorite bad idea. Please do that. You got about 10 minutes to do that because at 30 minutes past the hour, we will play Beat the Bad Idea, where both Andy and JD try to come up with a way to, put some controls around the horrible ideas that you've suggested. We'll go back to voting for your favorite questions. We'll then play What's Worse. If you listen to the CISO Vendor podcast, you'll know that game. And our winner from last week, Craig Herder, will join us to do just that. He'll have the What's Worse scenario. So Craig, make sure you get those two What's Worse challenges in, of the bad ideas in, by 30 minutes past the hour. And then last question and final advice. And the very last thing we'll do at the end of the hour is we'll go into our icebreaker, which is our cybersecurity speed dating. If you've never done it before, it's a lot of fun. And if you're nervous or you feel intimidated, don't be. These people are not intimidating. Trust me. Very last thing I want to mention is next Friday, is Hacking the IT Security Gap, an hour of critical thinking on improving communications and control over digital processes. The link to register for that is at the bottom of your screen right there. There's a button. If you click at that on any time during this video chat, you will it'll bring you to an open window. It will not take you out of this video chat. You can register for next week's and not be out of this video chat. So please click on that at any time during this. All right. Whew. Got through all of that. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, JD, for being patient. And thank you, audience, as well. All right. I am going to start with my opening question. How has managing insider risk traditionally been handled in the past? And JD, could you answer that for me? What is a traditional way of dealing with insider risk? And again, we're talking about the non-malicious format, or maybe we didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah. So in the past, we have handled insider risk poorly as a security organization and security community. We've treated all of our employees as bad employees and bad users. We didn't assume positive intent. We put things in place that slowed users down, kind of blocked productivity. And we want to stop doing all of that and think about it in a very different way.
All right. And what about you, Andy? How do you think it's been handled in the past?
I don't know. I guess I'll echo some of what JD said, but I don't know that much has changed, except that with the proliferation of tools and systems that we all use to do our jobs, applying some of the controls we want to do has just gotten harder. So it used to be there were a very few number of systems where you stored some of your information, and it was a little more feasible to whitelist everything or only allow people to do certain activities. And that's just not the modern world we live in. Mobile devices, people being able to sign up all sorts of third-party apps. So that even if the approach we've tried to take of trusting people and or deploying tools, the problem's just gotten a lot harder over the last couple of years with a proliferation of various tools that everybody's using to do their job.
All right. So let's just talk about then, how is the approach changing? Is it just changing, we're getting more tools and it's tougher to manage, like you said, Andy, or is there a new way to deal with it? JD, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree with Andy. The problem is getting harder. There's more and more ways to move data out of organizations with, every sort of cloud sharing platform you can imagine that our end users are using. And those cloud sharing platforms are really easy to share data publicly. They're easy to put different permissions in. The data is like shared externally. And so the problem certainly has gotten harder. I very much believe, and we dig into this and research this a lot at Code 482, is we have to figure out a different way to address the problem that doesn't include slowing down our users. So our security teams absolutely need visibility to all the data that's leaving the organization, and all the ways that data is exfiltrated, but we can't put in these overly complex policies and blocking restrictions because, one, they're not going to work in the first place, and two, our users are just going to kind of slide around them.
All right. And how have you been handling this, Andy?
Well, I think it's really important to get alignment on what data actually matters to you. So there's this tendency to try and protect everything the exact same way. And when you do, you're sort of bound to fail. You're trying to protect way too much information. And so it's maybe internal PowerPoints and other things aren't the same level of sensitivity as customer records or things like that. And when you try to have a one size fits all to that, you're gonna kill yourself. So like one great solution is trying to protect that data you really care about and make sure it doesn't go to the places that are harder to protect. It's like, don't put that data, don't allow people to move that data into those other environments, and then you don't have to have them in scope for some of what you're trying to protect. I think it's a far better approach than trying to allow that data to go everywhere and then try to protect all those various channels. So, but it's got to start from some reasonableness of what's worth protecting and where, and so on. Not everything has the same sensitivity level.
So this is a good, by the way, John has a good sort of basic question that really should set the stage for our entire discussion. And I don't know if you actually have any data points on this, JD, but John Procap asks, good point on an assumption of intent. So in your experiences, how much insider threat is accidental versus just wanting to do your job versus actually malicious? Any idea, JD?
That's a really great question. So based on kind of my own internal program and then all the programs that we work with customers on building, we see like less than 2% is really that malicious action. We, at the end of the day, our users are just trying to do their job, trying to get things done. And they don't know the proper ways to share data. They don't know the channels that, they can share data and can't share data, and they make mistakes. Our users are human, just like us CISOs are human. We all make mistakes, and our technology that we're using today makes it really easy to make mistakes, easy to overshare, easy to grab a file of what you think is personal information and upload it to your Dropbox account, and only to realize it included a lot of really important corporate information as well.
And this, by the way, you're sort of validating what I've also seen from some other research reports as well. What percentage or how much responsibility is it on CISOs that the insider risk problem has to be solved through education? Because we've talked to a lot of guests on this show, on this very video chat itself, and they're like, oh, I didn't know there was a tool to share huge files that's approved. And I'm a contractor that works for the company. Like we had the CISO for MGM on, where they're dealing with nonstop contractors, and they actually have a twofold solution. One is let them still use whatever tool they're using, but also share the corporate approved tool. Should you essentially have a mix of everything? Like let them do what they want and also tell them about the corporate approved tool, or shut down all the shadow IT and just focus on the corporate approved tools? Andy.
Safe defaults are a really important thing. I mean, we've done that in industrial design and so on for forever. You know, the big heavy machine press that you have to have both hands on the levers or the thing doesn't work, and so on, so you don't squish your hand. So having safe defaults in a whole bunch of your corporate tools means you don't have to spend the time on education, because you're going to miss somebody. There's going to be a new person. People are going to make mistakes and so on. So safe defaults are where it's at, and so frankly, when we evaluate new tools, we only pick ones that let us actually control that stuff. It's like, hey, the default is you can't share links with a third party, and we get notified every time that you try to open a document up, so that at least we can go and figure out, is that something we should be doing? So I'm a big fan of trying to constrain the problem space there, and not with technology, and use computers for what computers can do, is apply rules uniformly to things. So I'm not a big fan of having every single tool under the sun out there. So we try to vet everything we can. I can't make sure that somebody, unless I'm going to really lock down desktops and so on, I can't perfectly prevent people from using other tools, but I can try to monitor for it and tell people not to do it.
So monitoring, telling people, I'm assuming education comes in there, like, hey, by the way, we have an alternative to this product. Craig Herder actually asked a very relevant question. I'm going to throw this one to you, JD. What is getting in the way of eliminating insider risk? Like, why is it so prevalent, and how much insider risk can we actually mitigate? Like, isn't there going to be a certain percentage is just always going to get through, because there's always going to be somebody looking for an alternative solution and taking, corporate data off our sort of protected network? JD?
Yeah, I mean, I think insider risk is something that we are going to always have to deal with, especially now, like I mentioned before, just like with the technology that we're using, the ability to share data and collaborate easier than it ever was. I agree with Andy in just having those safe tools for people to use and share data and put controls around it. But I also feel like regardless of what we have in our organizations, our users are going to find ways to share data in ways that it slips out of our company and we don't have control on it. And so one of the things that I strongly believe in is just having visibility to where all of my company data is going, focusing on, risk. So risk to my risk to what the data is, risk to where that data is going, and specific indicators. Maybe it's like an employee that is disgruntled, put in their 2 weeks, and I know that there's probably a more likelihood of this particular person moving a ton of data outside of my organization. Those things I think all play into it, but I don't think it's enough for us to have specific controls without the ability to kind of monitor for all data leaving our organizations.
Can there be, Ian Pointer actually puts it again, an interesting comment here. It says, isn't it fun when both sides of the argument are partially true? And honestly, I don't know what he was exactly referring to there, but in essence, everyone sort of is in the right here, in that the insiders are just trying to do their job, and why are you making my life difficult? Security. And at the same time, it's no, we're trying to reduce risk, to make everyone better. So there's an understandable sort of pressure and concern going on from both sides. Now I lost my train of thought of where I was going to go with this question. Let me just go to.
Can I?
Go ahead, jump in. I'll come back to this. I'm sorry.
Ultimately, it's not the security team making that decision. It's the company making that decision. I'm enforcing the company's policy, not deciding it. So when we decide, here's the data that's worth protecting, and here's our stance on what tools you can use, that's not me deciding.
Right.
That's me in conjunction with the company, and I need my peers, my bosses, etc., to help support that message and advocate it with the whole company. But perfect protection's impossible, right? I mean, Edward Snowden, think about spies and other stuff. So once you start looking at the malicious side of this, good luck. To some extent, it's Are you doing physical bag checks for everybody back when we were in the offices? If you're not, well, then data's leaving your organization.
Right.
Or do you let people bring their own personal phones in and they're going to take pictures of their screen? You're not preventing that. So if you're not willing to go to those lengths, then perfect protection is impossible. So then it's about a certain calibration of what risks are you willing to deal with, what sort of accidental stuff are you willing to prevent, and so on. And what level of malicious person, would somebody have to be in order to bypass those controls?
By the way, you reminded me of the question I was going to ask. I'm sorry, I had lost my train of thought. Okay, so JD, you had mentioned something about someone leaving 2 weeks, disgruntled. They're at like maybe a high likelihood to start copying and moving things. Can something like simply copying files or being aware of like tracking every single movement? I mean, I've seen, especially like VDI programs where you literally can record every movement they're making on their screen, like. Can that be employed? And do you know organizations that do things like that where like, all right, high risk concern here. We're watching your every single move. What say you in that? And has that happened and can you do that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and it brings up kind of an artificial line, I would say, of like, okay, you don't want, frankly, I don't want to see everything that's going on
Right.
my employees' endpoints, but I do have an obligation to protect my company's data. And so, other players out there will do screen capture and will do keystroke logging and whatnot. I would not move in that direction. I feel like it crosses my artificial line to take those types of steps. I do think, though, that, if you're a high risk employee and you're about to leave the company, I should watch the files that you're moving out of my organization. I should do a review of those, make sure that they're not files that I care about before you end up leaving. And so that's where I kind of draw the line. I feel like insider risk programs, you brought up security awareness, and even doing that cursory review of people leaving and doing, assume positive intent, reaching out to the employee and asking questions of like, hey, I saw all these files moving. It's like a built-in ongoing security training and awareness program of what the security team is looking for, cares about. If you get a reach out from my analyst, it's going to be a very positive reach out. And it's a reach out to say, I saw you moved a giant file to your personal Dropbox. It contained a couple corporate documents. Can you tell me more about that? In a lot of cases, people are in a hurry. They grab a file, they throw it on their personal Dropbox. They don't realize it included something that maybe they shouldn't have taken with them.
All right. We have Dutch, who's been waiting in the wings to come on. Actually, good. Sort of, he's been minimized at the bottom of the screen. So, Dutch, come join us on video. Well, I hear you, but can we get your video on too, so we can see you?
Yeah,
because I'm sure you're wearing a unicorn T-shirt and a hat.
I'm not sure what Andrew did. Yeah, it's a little bit of different. It's not showing me in full screen.
Wait,
for
hold
some
it.
reason.
Can he? Andrew, can he be on video? I did nothing. You have to turn your video on, Dutch. We hear you.
My video. Okay.
There you go. Here we go. I don't know why we're now all small. No, you're not small now. You're just.
Yeah, it's
do think. You know what?
I tested my video ahead of time.
Do me a favor. Drop off completely. Andrew, invite him on. We'll bring you back on in just a second. Let me ask this question that just came in from Marissa Fagan. How should you respond to an employee that has triggered an incident? Just-in-time training or a 3 strikes policy, or I'm going to throw in something else. Andy?
Wow. I mean, it's a company cultural specific thing. Like if you haven't set an expectation ahead of time, you're sort of on the fly for it. There are some companies that have a very strict stance on this, and it's part of the company culture and norm. You'd better have told everybody ahead of time what the expectations are to some extent. But I'm not sure if the question was accidentally or intentionally. If somebody willingly and intentionally breaks one of your policies and they've been on notice about it, I don't tend to have a whole lot of patience for that. Or once they become aware of and you tell them about the policy and they continue to break it, that's like a one strike sort of situation. You will stop that or I'm turning off your access right now.
By the way, have you seen anyone being let go solely because they could not follow internal security policies? Either you, Andy, JD. Yes, you're nodding your head. Yes. So
Yeah,
can you
absolutely.
give me the scenario? What went down?
Oh gosh, what can I share?
Obviously.
Person shared really important information outside of the company, was talked to and said, you have to be more careful. You can't do X, Y, and Z. Month passed, person did it again, and then person got let go.
Well, there you go. All right, we now have Dutch back on. Somehow the video came to be. All right, Dutch, you got a question, you got a comment. Dutch is with AWS.
Yeah.
Go.
Yes. My question is, so how has insider threat, your calculation of the risks, how has it changed with the majority of people being remote for you?
Yeah, I can
Or
take
has it
that.
changed?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think it has changed, and it's changed quite a bit. And so here's kind of the reason we've all dealt with people being remote forever, and we've built our security strategies, our technology strategies to account for that. The thing that's different right now is this is a people thing, and our employees, regardless of what situation they're in a pandemic, they're stressed, they are distracted. I have my dog barking, my kids knocking on the door, a million distractions. And we're all under a lot more stress than we've ever been. That leads to a lot of different things. One, it leads to our employees making mistakes, sending stuff they shouldn't, exfiltrating stuff they shouldn't, with all the distractions going on. It also, from the stress level, we've done a ton of research on this where like people that are under a great deal of stress, it's almost like their foot comes off the brake and they do things that they wouldn't normally do. And this might include, I'm angry with my employer. I'm going to grab all this source code that I've been working on for the last year, and I'm going to put it on my personal GitHub spot, and I'm out of here. So, and that stuff is playing out certainly right now, greater than it ever has in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost want to be argumentative on purpose, but it hasn't changed a thing in my world.
Oh, good.
It hasn't.
But I think it's really dependent on the company. It's like at a former company that relied on people being in person with certain kinds of security controls that you really only felt comfortable doing for in person, no personal electronics at the workstation, etc. Then work from home has made a giant difference in certain environments that have access to really high risk data. In my world, it's changed virtually nothing. We had people remote. We already had great tooling to support it, and we don't see a higher mistake rate for other places that we can measure it. Code productivity, bugs, incidents in production, things like that would also be signals of that. So it hasn't. I think it really varies by company, tooling they have, etc. It hasn't been a change in my world at all.
All right, we need to get the poll up.
Awesome,
Andrew,
thanks.
Please get the poll up if you haven't done that. Oh, no, it's not up. We're a couple minutes late on the poll. Please get that up. If you have not clicked the link at the bottom, which I know a lot of you have not done yet, click the link. Join us for the next week, Hacking the IT Security Gap. We're going to just be talking about how much security people hate IT and IT hates security. No, we're not. We're going to talk about the improvement of that process, if you will, of which can. So if you have not, by the way, gotten your bad idea, and don't worry, you can still get in. And you should know, by the way, the winner of the best bad idea wins a really fancy CISO series fleece, which is cool. So that goes to the winner of the best bad idea.
I don't even have one.
You're waving to your head. Where's mine?
So,
Where's mine?
Yeah.
I don't have one. Where's mine?
ours?
But all right, that's fair.
Okay. All right. Here we go. The let's get to the question. The poll is up. The poll is officially up. So get in there and vote. And Craig, please start looking through those and pick two of the best bad ideas that will be going head to head in the what's worse scenario. All right. This is a good question from Phil. We are talking mostly about insider risk being non-malicious, but Phil asked a really valid question here. Has the 2% of malicious intent insider incidents actually been disproportionately harmful? JD, what have you seen?
On the malicious side, it has, for us anyways. It's costly. So we have to follow up, time. lawsuits threatened, stuff like that. So I would say in that regard, it is impactful. You guys see it play out in the news too. It's impactful from a news standpoint of like company, for specific companies, if you're moving from one company to the next and you're taking important data, maybe it's, self-driving car technology or whatever it is. I think for those particular companies, it's really impactful. I was talking to a customer a few months back where they had somebody leave their organization, start another company competing with their company because of all the data that they took. And it got so big and such a competitor for them that they actually just had to buy the company that this person started. And so, depending on your company and what you're doing, absolutely, the malicious aspect can be very impactful.
Andy, have you had any personal experience of the malicious being way more, disproportionately painful?
Yeah, I mean every once in a while you get a case where somebody accidentally sends the spreadsheet that contains super sensitive data outside and it gets exposed. But that's far rarer than when a person with access to a whole bunch of credit card numbers, because that's part of their job, directly starts stealing them, intentionally figuring out which ones are valuable and what all the associated data is with them, and sending them to an outside party. Like that's way more damaging.
Well, because there's
in almost all cases, it's intentional, and they're sending it to somebody who's explicitly going to try and monetize it and use it. Versus the other case where that's rarer.
So yeah, you can pretty much count on it being a very, very bad situation. All right. We have, just get your votes in. We are going to be playing the Beat the Bad Idea in just 4 minutes, if you will. So I want you to make sure that you vote for those bad ideas. And we got lots of questions in, so please vote them up, depending on which one you like. All right. From Chase Pettit, actually two of his here, the one that's more voted up. Is there meaningful risk in monitoring users to prevent insider risks, like keyloggers that capture an individual's banking password? So Chase, are you saying that we should use keyloggers to capture their passwords? I think maybe you're talking about like what I was referring to, the VDI of recording what everyone's doing. Like, here's the thing. I think you mentioned it earlier, JD, the invisible line. Like, how far can we go in terms of being intrusive to our employees on their job? And also, I know in Europe there are some privacy issues about working. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and I'm sure that changes depending on where you are. JD.
Sure. I'm going to go back to what I talked about earlier. I think monitoring key logging and screen capture is pretty intrusive. I would not go to that extent. I think as security teams, we see stuff that frankly we don't want to see. But what we need to do is figure out what's important to us. Like, it's important to us that we keep our company's data safe and file safe. And so if that means that we're monitoring when files leave the organization, that to me is where we stop. I don't want to review all your browsing history. I don't want to review, the sites that you go to, stuff like that. I do want to know if you go to your personal Dropbox and you throw a bunch of files on it. That's where where my line is, and everybody has to define that kind of for their particular company.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Andy? I mean, you got to do something for monitoring. Like, to what level is appropriate, not appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's right. It varies by company and the riskiness of the data.
And also, I got to say, not just company, but country that you're operating in, given the laws.
Yeah, though. I mean, from past experience there, employee monitoring tools have to be proportionate to risk. And in Germany, you get works councils and so on, where you have to get employee support for doing it. But my own sense is that's not an impediment if the risk actually warrants it. If you're processing people's financial or health information, then those security controls are proportional, and they're not that hard to support. And they're not actually outlawed. Or whatever. You can have full desktop monitoring, DLP, monitoring everything a customer service agent does, and it's entirely appropriate. The process you have to follow to make it happen varies by location, but those controls are all available to you. pretty much universally everywhere. Otherwise, you'd be kind of crazy to do business and allow that activity in those places. But it's proportionate to the risk. Like certain financials don't let you have access to any social media from your work computer, for example,
Right.
or your work phone, and they provide you a company phone that's to be used only for company purposes. And other companies, like it's an entirely BYOD environment where you do best effort to try and control these things. So, like, depending on what kind of risk you have, company culture, and so on, it's going to dictate a lot of this. I'm on the less intrusive side myself, but I'm also not processing healthcare information and billions of dollars of payments or government secrets, or
Right.
we're not a defense contractor. So my world's different than Lockheed.
Let me ask this question that came in from Paul, and I'll throw to you first, Andy. And I don't even know if you do this. When speaking of the board, how do you report the non-malicious part of your insider risk program, or your insider risk problem? Like, do you have a metric that you actually share with them? Is it something they're aware of? Like, does that become part of the board discussion? And if so, what do you say?
I don't currently, but I think it's useful to actually occasionally walk people through real incidents you've had, because if you don't actually walk them through real incidents, they may think that couldn't happen here. That's just a problem somewhere else thing. Mm-hmm. So whether malicious or non-malicious, giving people some insight into incidents or things you've had to investigate is, I think, more useful than metrics and stats on it from my perspective. At least that's how I've addressed it. But I think it's also important to point out, just culturally, that the difference between dealing with a malicious outsider taking over an insider's account and abusing it, and the monitoring you'd put in place to deal with the actual person going bad, like there's almost 100% overlap between those two things. And so building you don't have to talk about it in terms of either malicious or accidental insider abuse. You can look at it as what happens if an outsider gets that internal access, and what could they do, and what controls, detective and preventative, you should have in place without it looking like you don't trust your employees, and so
on. JD, since this is kind of core to your business, I would assume that you guys are reporting some level of insider risk. What is it you do? And after this, we're going to go to our next game. So what say you?
Yeah, I think board reporting is like, gosh, it's such a giant, we're kind of all over the board in the security community. And I agree with Andy that reporting metrics just isn't really all that valuable. And so what I do when I'm talking to the board is I pull out, like, what are the news stories going on? Because all the board members are reading all these different news stories. And so I'll pull out, like, okay, we're learning about this insider risk case or this or that or the other thing. And then I'll walk through what we do as a company to help protect the data. And so I don't dig into metrics. I mean, something that I'll look at is, like, what are the incidents that we had? What are the insider risk cases that we've investigated? Those are just numbers to the board team. And they're not super meaningful. And so instead, I'm going to focus on, like, an external story, and then I'm going to follow up with, like, here's what we do internally.
All right.
It's time to play Beat the Bad Idea.
All right. It's time to play Beat the Bad Idea. You have submitted your bad ideas. Andy and JD are going to do their best to try to beat the bad idea, meaning I will read some of your most voted up bad ideas, and they will try to figure out how they're going to put controls around it to make the thing not as bad as it actually sounds. All right. So I'll start with you, JD. Here's the first one. Have an annoying AI bot ask employees, "Are you sure?" every time there's an upwards in network traffic or they click on a link. How are you going to beat that bad idea? It's pretty bad.
That is a good one, or a bad one. Can I go to the development team and say, "Hey, don't do that"? Or I could get.
So the development team has actually created that. So that is actually in the environment. So how is this not going to make everyone's life miserable, or what other mitigation can you put in?
Oh my goodness, this one is terrible. I guess maybe I work out a deal with the development team to show the impact that particular bot is having, and how maybe it's not impactful, and potentially pitch a different way to do it and focus a little bit more on when I do see something that does look high risk or malicious or impactful, then I do the follow-up. I do think the follow-up is necessary, but inline follow-up or inline pop-ups based on no context is a surefire way to get your entire organization ticked off at the security team.
Oh yes, we know. That's why it's a bad idea. Whoops, hold on. I didn't give you proper credit for that. That's actually a very good answer. Try to win the development team over. Andy, what are you going to do in this situation? Every time they click a link, they get an "Are you sure?" pop-up.
Wow. I mean, there's times, though, in certain workflows that point-in-time injections actually make sense, not every link.
But
I'm going to adjust it so that internal links we just won't allow people to click links anymore. That's what we're just gonna get rid of all HTTP and link clicking, and we'll make the problem. Some organizations don't allow any emails to have inbound links. If you're really paranoid about it, they literally strip all links from inbound emails. So that's how we're gonna solve it.
By the way, I'm gonna give you a bravo for one-upping the bad idea if we were even a worse idea. Good job on that, Andy. All right, let me throw this. Okay, so this is an interesting flip on this. I'm going to throw this one to you, Andy. You're going to have to deal with this one first. Change the trust model to not trust anyone on the inside of your network. So this malicious, excuse me, not malicious, but this insider risk thing, you're taking to the extreme extent. So you trust no one with inside your network, but you treat everyone outside of the network as trusted. So flipping that theory. All right, how are you gonna manage this one?
Wasn't that a prison? Isn't that that's a prison, right? Where we trust the people outside the prison more than the people in it. So that
we're keeping the people from the inside leaving, so we don't actually trust them.
Well, yeah. So you just described.
You do let your employees to go home, right?
I mean, I do. I mean, they're all working from home, but I mean, it is kind of funny though how like that. I guess it sort of makes sense, but if all of your data is public anyway, then maybe it doesn't matter, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe this doesn't sound so crazy. I worked at a university, so
keep going.
Yeah.
We actually had someone come up with that bad idea. Just make everything public. Then you got no worries about losing anything.
David Brin wrote a whole book The Transparent Society, about exactly this. Like everything's just public. Everybody knows everything. And then there are no more secrets.
So none of all your financials are public as well?
Yeah, everybody's. So
everybody's, yours included. All right. So we're living in a Star Trek society.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. JD is laughing on this. JD, how are you going to handle this? So we're trusting everyone on the outside, nobody on the inside.
Trusting everyone on the outside, no one on the inside. Mm-hmm. You're going to go back to circa 1980 and just put firewalls around everything. Everybody will be miserable, but you will have true collaboration only internal to your company, and that's the only way that you can make that work.
All right, I'm going to give you a. Hold on, let me give you this. Because you gave me a good and a bad answer on that one, so I like it. All right, kudos to you. We are going to be playing the What's Worse game coming up soon, so Craig, get ready in about 7 minutes to play that. But let's get back to the questions, because we have tons of great questions. And by the way, thank you, everybody. The chat room is blowing up. I appreciate that. I've been having a hard time paying attention to everything that's going on right now, but thank you very much for that. All right, a question that from Paul Lanzi has come in. He's with Remediate. I've read that insider threat is dependent on opportunity, means, and motivation. What's InfoSec responsibility as it relates to each of these? And do you agree with that statement, JD?
Can you grab the first part of that again?
Yeah, sure. So he read that insider threat is dependent on these three things: opportunity, means, and motivation. So what's InfoSec's, how does InfoSec apply itself to opportunity, means, and motivation?
Yeah, so this, what he's targeting and what he's defining, and this is really, really important, is more of that malicious. And so on the malicious side, it is means and motivation and opportunity. On the non-malicious side, where we have a majority of our problem, it's none of that. It is, carelessness as I'm speeding through my day. It is very, very much an accidental issue that puts our company at risk, and not those other things. On the malicious side, I'll be honest with you, it's hard to respond to the malicious. Given, if somebody has a foothold in your environment or they have access to your machine, they're going to run some sort of malware that's going to siphon out data. That's a really, really hard problem to solve. I mean, you certainly need visibility tooling on that. You need some sort of EDR tool on that to look for that malware on your machine, but that's a really tricky spot to respond to.
I'm going to jump to another question here for you, Andy, and I like this one. And also your data possible. Oh, by the way, we forgot to mention you have a book, JD, that one of your colleagues wrote, actually with a few others. Can you give me the heads up on that? And by the way, if anyone from Code 42 is watching, if there's a link to that or a link to the report or whatever it is, that's it. Inside Jobs. What's the story on this book?
Yeah, the story on the book is a lot of what we're talking about in this conversation. It's trying to take kind of the old way of thinking about insider risk or insider threat, that thinking of it as like malicious users in the company, blocking everything, locking down everything, and trying to flip it on its head and thinking about how do we empower users? How do we give them the right collaboration technology? How do we weave kind of this ongoing security awareness training into how we deal with insider risk at the company? And so the book is just kind of like trying to take that fundamental shift from the old way of how we did things to the new way of like what's really effective in today's world.
Okay. And by the way, again, somebody from the Code 42, if you can provide a link to that. And correct me if I'm wrong, do you guys also have some report as well now, or no? That's the story.
I think yes, we do usually do a yearly report. Where that is, I don't know. So
all right,
if somebody can
please
send a link to that, would be great.
Team, let me know. All right, here's my question though for you first, Andy, and I bet you, JD, you'll have an answer to this too. Chase Pettit asked this question: is there a department or function within a business within which insider risk is disproportionately created? So marketing, sales, HR, accounting. That's a very intriguing question. Have you seen that? Andy, I'll start with you. And JD, I know you're nodding your head, so you have an answer as well. Andy?
I mean, depending on the type of business, yes. I mean, so in the case of the malicious, or even just accidental, it's the people that are handling the most sensitive information. So, I mean, in almost any business, think of your treasury department, or your accounts payable and receivable are going to be pretty highly attacked. And they also have access to pretty sensitive stuff like bank numbers and maybe all the personal information around employees because they're paying them, et cetera. If you're a payments company, you can isolate most people from having to have the raw payment stuff, but the team that handles chargebacks at your company, if you've got that, has to deal with raw credit card numbers and so on, as an example. So they're like an immediate place where you probably have to look more at controls because you can't actually do a bunch of mitigations, just as one example. But it varies by team. I mean, like Apple does, crazy amounts of ridiculous maybe not ridiculous for them, but for many of us, an amount of compartmentalization that wouldn't make sense at a lot of companies, but they're very interested in protecting new products and so on. So that's, so any team working on some new sensitive thing falls into that category.
JD,
yeah,
have you seen departments?
No, I would largely agree with Andy. I mean, it is dependent on the company. For us, I mean, it's our source code. That's really important to us. But then I flip over. I mean, our financials are really important. Our HR data is certainly very important. The thing I think I would call out and is really important to remember is you can focus on a department and you can say, I'm gonna put controls there. I'm gonna monitor the right things and whatnot. The reality is like data moves from department to department to department to department, and people have access. Like my IT team has access to really everything. And so, it's sort of like a misperception to think like I'm going to lock down marketing or finance and then I'm good. The reality is like many other ancillary teams throughout the company still have access to all of that data.
Mm-hmm. All right, get Craig. We're almost ready for our What's Worst game. So, Andrew, get Craig ready to do that. Let's just hit one more question, and then we'll move on to. This is a good question from Marissa Fagan, and maybe you actually have some data on this. Actually, Craig is connected right now. If that's it, I'll come back to that. Here we go. Let's do this.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right, the What's Worst game. Here it is. This is Craig Herder. He's our winner of last week's Best Bad Idea. He has pulled two of the bad ideas that are of equal weight, I hope, in the of the bad ideas to go head to head in a What's Worse comparison. So the idea is we all know that these are bad ideas. Andy and JD, your job is to tell us which one is worse, which one would cause more damage. Risk management exercise. I hand this over to you, Craig. Go for it.
So question number one, or bad idea number one, allow forwarding to personal Gmail, Google Drive for all, and blame Google for insider data leaks.
That'd be nice.
And option number two, put so many layers in the way of access that people just give up. It eliminates all risk.
All right. We throw this to you. JD, I'm going to make you answer first. Go ahead. Can you tell Craig which one's worse of those two?
I feel like number two is worse because in number two, I don't have a company. I don't have, I have nothing to come to work for. In one, I have a lot of risk, but hopefully I have the ability to respond and react and whatnot. But number two, I don't have a company anymore.
Good point. Andy, agree or disagree there?
I'm going to unfortunately have to agree. And there's the old saying that the safest computer is one that's, turned off and buried in concrete. It also can't make you any money or do anything productive, but it can't be broken into. So I'm going to say that one's worse. But I guess maybe I'll put the caveat. It depends on who you are. Think about the access controls for, again, go back to the defense contractor and people having to work in literal safes, in an actual skiff. That seems like overkill to most of us, but that is the threat model at certain places. So that actually describes their work environment. So maybe it's not a bad idea for them.
Let me throw this out. If you were to be sued by Google, it might, for many companies, that just may be the end of the company. So getting to your point earlier, JD, the second option, I won't even have a company, but the first one, you might not have a company very soon after. What do you think? Could
That's
it
true.
essentially just be delaying the inevitable?
I'm buying time, the first option.
All right, Craig, thank you very much, and congratulations for winning the Best Bad Idea. Your fleece is on its way, by the way. All right. Thank you very, very much. All right. We have just a little bit of time left here. Please get your questions in. You can still throw in your best bad ideas. Also, that link at the bottom of the screen will change to our meetup that we're going to be having right after this. So please get your click on that link to register for next week's video chat. By the way, I'll tell you that the week after that will be off for spring break, but we are on next week. So please click on the link to register for next week's video chat as well. All right, another question from Marissa Fagan, and I think I'm going to throw this one more to you, JD, because I think Andy, the way that you've set up your organization, it doesn't matter. But how much of insider risk can come from bring your own device? And is that the core problem right there?
That's one of the problems. It certainly isn't all of the problems. The whole bring your own device thing, different companies apply it in different ways. And so if you do have a bring your own device policy, but you're allowed, the reason that you can do it is because you're putting your security controls on it. You treat it like a normal corporate device. And if you have the right visibility to it, you can still mitigate that insider risk action. So we don't do bring your own device at Code 42. We buy everyone very, very expensive laptops, so we don't need to. But if I had a bunch of devices that I was going to allow to connect, I would mandate that we have to have some visibility to what's going on the device. And so I think there's ways that you can do bring your own device and still cover off on kind of that insider threat and the monitoring aspects that you need.
It's
What
way
about you,
easier in
Andy?
the it's just way easier in the phone space than it is in the laptop space. You think about the constraints on a mobile device. It's way easier to do BYOD and get the security you'd probably want than it is on a laptop. You're not going to back to the whole personal data access and so on. If you don't actually want to run the full keylogger, et cetera thing for people's personal stuff, then the best way to deal with that is to tell people that you're doing that on their work device to some extent. You've got full process monitoring. You're capturing certain amounts of network traffic, and then they can decide whether they want to use that device for doing how much personal stuff, and otherwise keep their own personal device separate. You probably don't do that same level of monitoring on a mobile device, and so it's a more tractable problem to do BYOD for mobile than it is to do if you want to have certain kinds of monitoring for malware and other things, then it is to do it on laptops, because getting that monitoring on a laptop on somebody else's device without being intrusive is almost impossible. So, I mean, that's the distinction.
We had the CISO for Sally May on, and they, being that they're dealing with heavy financial information and financial transactions, they also set up their employees, but they had very strict controls put on those devices as well. And that was, definitely significant for them. Good question that came in here from Dutch Schwartz. And this goes back to, and we haven't spent that much time talking about this, and maybe this will be our last question before we get to our final thoughts, is interested to know how Andy and JD think we can help the average employees understand accidental risks better. Because everything we're just discussing now, I mean, honestly, your average employee, it's not even like hitting their synapse. They're not thinking about it at all. So that's question number one. And then question number two, what can managers do to be supportive during stressful times like now? What do you think? JD?
Sure. So I mentioned this before, like a really good insider risk program turns into like an ongoing training and awareness program. So I will tell you, we are monitoring data leaving our organization. We're going to assume positive intent, and an analyst from my team will reach out and say, hey, I saw this, tell me more about it. And that action alone has shifted things over time within my company, where people just tell on themselves. They're constantly telling on themselves. They'll send security an email. We get probably an email on a weekly basis saying, hey, I have to move this file. Tell me how I do it the right way. Or, hey, I have to do X, Y, and Z. Or I'm leaving the company in 2 weeks and I'm moving all my personal files. And I just want to let you guys know, here's what I'm doing. I think that you shift behavior and you shift culture and you start to educate when you get people that are going to proactively reach out to you and ask questions. And so even just like kind of that in the moment, like having the analyst follow up, ask questions makes a huge difference kind of across the organization. So that was question one. Helping our employees right now. Gosh, I wish I knew all the answers to that. Certainly my teams are going through lots of challenging situations. I think everyone's are. I don't have a great answer for that. I think just, all of us as managers, just being there for people, creating space for them, making sure that, you're sharing also, like we're in this too, like we're going through the same thing just like they are, and making sure you're being open to it.
All right. Let me throw this, and I realize we haven't mentioned DLP, which is kind of the thing that's sort of an avoidance mechanism. But I mean, what problems have DLP been introducing? I mean, I know this is something we should have addressed earlier on. JD?
Sure. So I'm a recovering DLP user. I can say that. Data loss prevention. And when I implemented it, it created problems such as just like, widespread friction between the rest of the organization and my security team. It causes, different types of friction within kind of the user's day-to-day because it's blocking, legitimate business actions or whatnot.
And so I think of the bad ideas we suggest.
Some of the bad ideas. The other one that I think is overlooked a lot of the times is because DLP was orchestrated in a way where it's opening every file and looking at every little bit of context, it crushed machines. I mean, it like literally CPU utilization of machines was terrible. And just people, people ripped them out. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is just get people to understand there's a better way to do this. There's a different way to do this, still addressing insider risk, but doing it in a way where we're not stuck to this old DLP technology.
All right. Let me get your thoughts on both DLP, Andy, and also the question about, what can the average person do and the average manager do as well. And then I want to get into quick summaries. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, on the what average employee should do and so on, this is a little bit back to my point about automation, and even giving people the right tools to do their jobs. Like, a whole bunch of this varies by organization, but like if you're an org that's using, I don't know, G Suite and Google Docs for everything, then you've got way fewer files that everybody is moving around. They're sharing links with each other for things, and you have way more tracking in that platform for when people share those links with outside people. And going and downloading that document to your device and then mailing it separately is a very different thing, and not something an ordinary person would do most of the time. And so it stands out a little bit more than when you can just when you're just dealing with sharing links and so on. So like sometimes and even back to the making it easier, it's like, Google does allow you to say like, hey, you've got third parties involved in this conversation. Are you really sure you want to be careful about what you're doing? So just in time warnings on things. When you go to share a document, making sure people know that if they fat fingered the email address or the username that they put in there, that they can actually see who they're sharing something with right there when they're doing it, not after the fact, not alerting them, but right in line, and so on, are some of the just best things to make it obvious to people and avoiding some of those mistakes. It's not training them in advance. Sometimes it's just in time stuff that's probably more effective at getting people to think a little bit about their behavior.
All right, let me just quickly, I want you get ready for a 1-minute summary of our discussion today. I just want to remind people, we changed the link, but next Friday is Hacking the IT Security Gap. Also, please stick around for our icebreaker. Guess what? That link at the bottom has changed to our icebreaker. So go ahead and click on that now. It'll open up another window. You can log in. You're going to have to use like a Gmail account to log in, but just type in your full name and participate. It's a lot of fun. We want you to be there. Also, tell your friends to join us every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's a lot of fun, if hopefully you've discovered if you're new, first time being here. Also, a huge thanks again to Code 42 and JD as well. And I want to thank my guests, JD Hansen and Andy Steingrubel from Code 42 and Pinterest, respectively. And lastly, if you want to sponsor a video chat, just please let me know. Just ping me over at david@cisoseries.com. Happy to help you out there. All right. With just a minute left, JD, I will go to you. And by the way, I put the link of your book from Amazon.com, your book with also Mark and another author as well, Inside Jobs, so they can get that as well. Your last thoughts in just a minute or less about insider risk.
Just a minute or less. I guess my thoughts would be, everybody has to deal with this problem. As security professionals, we all have to figure out a way to address the problem. I would ask that everybody kind of be open to a different way to think about it. If you're interested in learning more, I love these discussions of just thought leadership, like how do we think about this space and this problem in a different way? And love you to read the book and just give me your thoughts and comments. And obviously love you to get a general overview of like what we're doing in the space, our product, how we're approaching it. And if there's any feedback there, I would love to connect with people and just brainstorm on that.
Excellent. Very much. Andy, your last thoughts on insider risk.
Make sure your program is tailored to what you really think are important things to protect. You can't protect everything. And have top-down support. It can't be the security team trying to dictate the policy for the company. It's the company's policy that you're the carrier or the implementer of. But like cultural buy-in towards certain data being important to protect is huge. If people don't think it's important, they're not gonna jump through any hoops to protect it. They're gonna actively subvert it. So I'm not sure if that's training and awareness or it's company culture, but some amount of getting people to understand what's truly important and what the problems would be if that data goes missing is really important to get people on board. Because if they care about it, that's a big chunk of it, of them thinking twice about doing it. That protecting information is part of their ethos and not just getting their other functional job done.
Excellent point. Andy, thank you so much. Andy Steingrubel, CISO over Pinterest, JD Hansen, CISO over at Code 42. Thank you, Code 42. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Andrew. We just have a few seconds left. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate it. Let's continue the conversation over there at the Icebreaker. Click on the link right now. We'll see you over there. I got to move some lights and stuff, but I'll pop up on screen on the other one, and we'll start in less than 60 seconds our meetup. Thank you, everybody.